Welcome to HFY Chronicles. At the sum of 1,000 subscribers, I'll post a special series just for you. Subscribe now. They came without warning, without declaration, without mercy. The Grorri invasion force descended upon Nova Haven, humanity's most prosperous outer colony, in the dead of night, when most of its 5 million inhabitants slept peacefully in their beds. No alarms sounded, no defense systems activated. The colony's modest security force never even had time to send a distress signal before they were overwhelmed. By first light, columns of smoke rose from the once gleaming city. Bodies littered the streets, men, women, children, their lives extinguished with clinical efficiency. Those fortunate enough to survive found themselves in chains, herded like cattle toward massive transport ships. The Grorri soldiers moved with practiced precision, their scaled skin reflecting the flames of the burning metropolis, their 4 eyes scanning methodically for any sign of resistance. Private Dorn'r stood at the edge of what had once been the colony's central plaza, now a processing center for human captives. He watched as his comrades sorted the survivors, the strong for labor, the intelligent for research, the rest for disposal. The efficiency pleased him. This was the Grorri way. This was how they had built their empire across 17 star systems. This was how they would continue to expand. "First Lieutenant wants us moving by dusk," said Krevner, Dorn'r's squad mate, his voice a gravelly rumble through his translator. "The humans have another settlement 200 kilometers west. Command wants it secured before they can organize." Dorman nodded, his secondary eyelids blinking away the ash that floated on the hot air. "These humans are soft," he said, watching as a female captive was separated from her offspring, their cries meaningless noise to his ears. "No defenses, no warriors. It's almost disappointing." Kreven made the clicking sound that passed for laughter among their kind. "Were you expecting a challenge, young one? The intelligence reports were clear. Humans spread themselves thin across too many worlds. They value comfort over security." He gestured toward the burning horizon. "This is the price of their arrogance." As the Grorri forces prepared to march west, none of them noticed the small, unmarked shuttle that lifted off from the far side of the colony, carrying 6 survivors and a cargo hold full of manufacturing equipment. None of them intercepted the tightly encrypted burst transmission that shot toward Earth. None of them understood that they had just awakened something terrible in the human psyche, something that had lain dormant since the last great war on Earth, centuries ago. The message was simple: Nova Haven has fallen, 5 million dead, implementing protocol Hive Mind. By nightfall, the Grorri vanguard had established a forward camp 15 kilometers from the second human settlement, New Olympus. Intelligence suggested a population of 3 million with similarly negligible defenses. The operation would be a carbon copy of Nova Haven, quick, efficient, total. Dorn'r collapsed onto his field cot, his rifle still warm from the day's executions. The first city had been reduced to ashes by midday. The second would fall even faster. Intelligence reported that some humans were already fleeing, though they would find no sanctuary in the wilderness. The clock was running down on any potential human military deployment from the core worlds, but even if they managed to dispatch forces, it would take weeks for them to arrive. With every other conquered species, response had always been slow, disorganized, ineffective. "Fools," he thought, "what is a colony without a garrison?" He drifted into sleep, thinking of the commendations he would receive, the promotions that awaited him after this campaign. Perhaps he would be granted his own slave detail, perhaps even a human or two. They were said to be adaptable, if properly broken. The Grorri homeworld of Cravash did not have bees. It had similar enough creatures, small flying animals that gathered nutrients from flowering plants, but none that swarmed like Earth's bees, none that formed hives or demonstrated collective intelligence. This was, mostly, irrelevant to the invasion, but perhaps it might have helped if Dorn'r had understood the concept of a hive mind, of thousands of individual entities acting as one organism. Probably not. The Grorri understood only dominance, only conquest. The first drone skittered into camp at moonrise. It was roughly the size of Dorn'r's fist, with 6 jointed legs and a crude iron shell that appeared to have been hastily stamped from poor quality metal. It moved with jerky, mechanical motions, clanking like a broken timepiece as it navigated between the tents. Dorn'r spotted it during his midnight watch rotation and, without hesitation, crushed it beneath the heel of his armored boot. It popped with a satisfying crunch, releasing a flash of lithium-green flame that briefly illuminated the darkness. "Toys!" he barked to his lieutenant, who had emerged from a nearby command tent. "The humans think to frighten us with children's playthings." The lieutenant approached, examining the smoldering remains with his primary eyes while his secondary pair kept watch on the perimeter. "Send a sample to the science division," he ordered. "It may be nothing, but—" He never finished the sentence. A low, vibrating hum began to fill the air, not quite a sound, more a sensation that started deep in Dorn's skull, subsonic, throbbing, chewing at the edges of his consciousness. He stumbled slightly, momentarily disoriented, as the camp's perimeter searchlights flickered and then went dark one by one. "Power disruption," someone shouted from across the camp. "Check the generators." But Dorn'r wasn't looking at the generators. His four eyes were fixed on the night sky, where the stars were beginning to vanish, one by one, as if being swallowed by a creeping darkness. Except, it wasn't darkness, it was movement. A tide of black metal shells, pockmarked with crude welds, descending upon the camp like a living storm cloud. No eyes, no claws, just the faint glint of torchlight reflected in glass lenses. "Open fire!" the command echoed across the camp as Grorri soldiers scrambled for weapons. Dorn'r's rifle spat rounds into the approaching swarm. A drone dropped, then another. He reloaded, fired again, reloaded. 6 drones destroyed by his hand alone, but the swarm did not thin. The swarm did not retreat. The swarm did not care about individual losses. This was not a battle of skill or valor or even technology. This was a battle of simple, brutal arithmetic. A drone latched onto the barrel of his rifle. For a second they stared at each other, him panting, it faceless and impassive. Then the shaped charge at the center of the device detonated, spearing a jet of superheated copper through the gun's firing chamber, rendering it useless. He tossed the ruined weapon aside and drew his sidearm. 5 shots, 5 drones destroyed. Then a 6th drone attached itself to the pistol and melted it to slag in his hand. He barely managed to drop it before the heat seared his scales. All around him, the camp had erupted into chaos. Grorri soldiers fired wildly into the swarm, but for every drone they destroyed, 10 more seemed to take its place. A Grorri BT-3A main battle tank, its treads already torn to shreds by the mechanical insects, fired its main cannon into the densest part of the swarm, vaporizing perhaps a dozen drones in a spectacular explosion. The tank commander must have felt a moment of triumph until 100 drones rammed themselves down the tank's barrel, their thermite charges welding it shut from the inside. The tank crew abandoned their vehicle, seemingly unharmed, until the commander reached for a sidearm. A drone detected the movement, attached itself to his hand and detonated. The explosion peeled his fingers back to the knuckles, leaving him screaming in agony but very much alive. "Fall back!" roared Grand Admiral Vexorn, his voice cutting through the cacophony of battle. A drone clamped onto his shoulder. He swatted at it reflectively, then screamed as it exploded in a flash of magnesium and ball bearings, depriving him of his shoulder, his right ear, and half his face. He collapsed to the ground, still conscious, still screaming. Dorn'r looked frantically for an escape route, but there was nowhere to fall back to. The swarm had encircled the camp completely. A transport truck, somehow spared thus far, tried to ram its way through the wall of drones. It made it perhaps 10 meters before its tires burst under the assault of hundreds of tiny metal bodies. Then the drones swarmed the cabin. More detonations, more screams. Dorn'r noticed a pattern. The drones were targeting weapons, vehicles, communications equipment, and when they targeted Grorri soldiers, they inflicted injuries that would not kill, but would not heal either, crippling, agonizing wounds. The Grorri had broken countless interspecies conventions in their conquests, had never shown mercy to those they deemed inferior. They had never sought the protection of the human concept known as the Geneva Conventions. Now they were experiencing the consequences of that choice. Dorn'r watched as the drones spared those who surrendered. A lieutenant who had found somewhere a white cloth and waved it desperately above his head remained untouched as drones buzzed around him. Dorn'r himself realized the drones were herding the survivors back toward their tents, which now had countless mechanical eyes watching from every surface. He let them guide him. What choice did he have? None of the surviving Grorri slept that night. The darkness was punctuated by explosions as drones methodically searched the camp, identifying and destroying any remaining weapons, guns, knives, even particularly heavy sticks that might be used as clubs. They welded everything into a grotesque pile of slag in the center of the camp, a monument to the Grorri's defeat. As dawn broke over the horizon, Dorn'r and the other survivors sat in silent shock, surrounded by their injured comrades and the constant humming presence of the drones. The camp, that had been a staging ground for conquest just hours before, was now a prison, and they were the inmates. A solitary figure appeared at the edge of the camp, walking unhurriedly toward the gathered Grorri. A human female, wearing no armor, just a simple, tidy black military uniform and a light backpack from which drones flitted in and out every few seconds. A small drone hovered in front of her face, translating her words into crude Grorri language as she spoke. "You killed 5 million of ours," she said, her voice calm, almost conversational. "We will kill 50 of yours. Your emperor, his generals, his brood." The drone projected a hologram into the air, a three-dimensional image of the Grorri Emperor Dracoth fleeing through a dead forest on their homeworld, thousands of light-years away. As they watched, a drone latched onto his right leg and detonated, severing the limb in a flash of white-hot energy. Another took his right arm. The Emperor crawled forward on his remaining limbs, leaving a trail of ichor behind him. The drones let him crawl for hours, the holograms speeding through time. Then they took an eye, then an ear. "Your royalty begs for death," said the human, her expression unchanged. "But you?" she gestured to the surviving Grorri soldiers. "You'll live. You'll rebuild our cities. You'll wear our clothes, teach our hymns to your children, vote in our elections." In the hologram, a drone finally attached itself to the Emperor's forehead and sent a stream of molten copper straight through his brain. The image flickered and died, leaving only the human standing before them, surrounded by her mechanical swarm. "You will live," she continued. "You might thank us one day, but you will no longer be Grorri. You will not be slavers or murderers or warriors. You will be human." Dorn'r swallowed hard, his throat dry with fear. "Or?" he managed to ask. All it took was a slight increase in the pitch of the drones surrounding the camp, a barely perceptible change in their collective hum that nonetheless sent shivers down Dorn'r's spine to convince him of the futility of that question. There was no awe. There was only submission. The human smiled, but the expression did not reach her eyes. "My name is Commander Alexandra Reyes. I am the architect of Protocol Hive Mind, and you are now citizens of the Terran Cooperative, whether you wish to be or not." As she spoke, more humans began to appear at the edges of the camp. Dozens, then hundreds. None were armed with conventional weapons. They didn't need to be. The swarm was their weapon, their shield, their judge and executioner. "The choice the Grorri Empire made," Commander Reyes continued, "was not whether to fight humans. It was whether to fight human soldiers, or human engineers." She gestured to the drones. "We've had centuries to perfect our craft, to build machines that think faster than organic brains, to develop manufacturing processes that can turn raw materials into weapons in hours rather than months." She approached Dorn'r, stopping just a few paces away. "Your invasion force destroyed our colony's military garrison in the first strike. Very efficient, but you missed our fabrication plants, our automated mines, our distributed AI networks." A drone landed on her shoulder, its legs gently gripping the fabric of her uniform. "By the time you reached the center of Novahaven, we had already begun production of the first wave." Dorn'r looked at the drone on her shoulder, then at the thousands still hovering above the camp. How many?" he asked. "Current production stands at approximately 100,000 units per hour," she replied. "We've deployed swarms to every Grorri world, every fleet, every military installation. The war ended before your people even realized it had begun." In the days that followed, Dorn'r and the other survivors were put to work. Not as slaves, the humans made that distinction very clear, but as laborers tasked with rebuilding what they had destroyed. The drones remained ever-present, watching, evaluating, occasionally intervening when a Grorri showed signs of resistance. Commander Reyes visited the work sites frequently, observing their progress. During one such visit, Dorn'r found the courage to approach her. "Why not kill us all?" he asked. "After what we did, it would be justified." She considered him for a moment before answering. "Because that's what you would have done, and we are not you." She gestured to the partially reconstructed buildings around them. "This is not about revenge, it's about transformation. Your species has known only conquest for generations. We are going to teach you something else. And if we refuse to learn?" The drone on her shoulder adjusted its position slightly, its lenses focusing on Dorn'r's face. "Then you'll have very long, very painful lives," she said simply. "But I don't think it will come to that. Already some of your people are beginning to understand." She was right. As weeks turned into months, Dorn'r noticed changes among his fellow Grorri. They began to take pride in their reconstruction work. They began to interact with the human supervisors not with hatred but with curiosity. Some even volunteered for additional duties, eager to learn human skills, human technologies. 1 year after the invasion, Dorn'r stood in what had once been Novahaven's central plaza, now rebuilt, now thriving once again. Humans and Grorri moved through the space together, not as enemies, not even as reluctant allies, but as something approaching neighbors. The drones still watched from rooftops and street corners, but their numbers had diminished. Commander Reyes found him there, gazing at a memorial to the 5 million who had died on that first terrible night. "Your integration evaluations have been exemplary," she said without preamble. "You've been recommended for citizenship." Dorn'r turned to face her. "I helped destroy this place," he said. "I don't deserve citizenship." "It's not about deserving," she replied. "It's about becoming. The person you were died in that camp along with the Grorri Empire. The question is, who are you now?" He had no answer for her, not yet. But as he watched a young Grorri child playing with a human child in the shadow of the memorial, he thought perhaps he might find one, given time. The drones continued their silent vigil, a reminder of humanity's capacity for both mercy and terrible retribution. They would remain for generations, until the day when they were no longer needed, when the Grorri had truly become something else, something better. Perhaps, had they done things differently, had the Grorri been kinder in their approach to the galaxy, it would have gone better for them. But in their arrogance, they had never considered that the species they sought to conquer might not fight as they did, with ships and soldiers and brute force, but with ingenuity, with swarms, with the cold, calculating patience of those who build rather than destroy. They had never considered that their defeat would come not with a bang, but with a buzz. As the final echoes of this tale fade, I hope you've enjoyed this journey through humanity's ingenious response to the Grorri invasion. If this story of retribution, transformation, and unexpected mercy resonated with you, please take a moment to like this video and share your thoughts in the comments below. What would you have done in Commander Rey's position? Would you have shown the same mercy to those who showed none? Don't miss future stories from our channel by subscribing now and turning on the notification bell. Each week we bring you thought-provoking tales from across the cosmos that challenge your imagination and explore the depths of human potential. Join our growing community of science fiction enthusiasts and be the first to experience our next adventure. Until next time, remember that sometimes the most powerful weapons aren't the ones that destroy, but the ones that transform.